The digital transition. The Digital Transition, brought to you by Fulton Trotter Digital, a podcast series created to assist those tasked with implementing digital strategies, where we will share our knowledge and experiences to support you in your transition. Welcome to The Digital Transition, podcast number 6. I'm your host, Nathan Hildebrandt, and today I'm talking to David Philp, or the Philpstar as he's better known in industry. David is a global BIM and information consultant and director of BIM for AECOM. Thanks for being here, Dave.
Hey, Nathan, great to join you today.
Mate, first of all, let's start with yourself. Now, for those that aren't aware of who you are and the various roles you've played in industry, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I can indeed, Nathan. So as you can probably tell by my accent straight off, I am Scottish sort of thing. And I've been in industry now for almost 25 years within there. Like many, I started off as a young graduate. My background is in building engineering and construction management. So, I went through the typical graduate scheme, working for a main contractor. And like any, thought I'd be doing project management, but spent the first couple of years banging in pegs, surveying and everything. So I've also had a passion, if you like, for surveying and data capture within there. And then went on to do, a master's in property and construction management as well, which, was really quite important to me, as well, sort of thing, to just understand asset management and, operational life cycle as well. So I spent almost 20 years as a main contractor working, as technical director from there. And then this thing happened and eventually became BIM program director at Balfour Beatty. So you could say about 10 years ago, went from probably quite a traditional career trajectory to starting into, this world of BIM digitization within there. But actually, one of the things I thought was really important and I still believe in is, and I keep really close to, is, understanding the profession, understanding the project life cycle, our engineering, construction management is still hugely important. And, I always make sure I've got linkage, especially with professional institutes. I'm a trustee at our Chartered Institute of Building. So I always think it's important when we talk about digitization, still having that solid foundation within industry as well, and how we can improve each of them. Well, you got to understand the problem statement. So about 5 years ago, I joined AECOM, where I've now have the role of global BIM and information management consultancy director, working with our businesses across the globe to help our clients get more value out of their data and their information, and obviously trying to transform what they do, especially in terms of during the operational life cycle and portfolio asset management as well, increasingly. And I think we are quite unique at AECOM. We've got some over 80,000 employees there, and we've got unique circumstances to explore big data opportunities. We've got probably over 20,000 BIM practitioners across the globe, especially within the ANZ marketplace, which is particularly mature within there as well. And at any time, we've got about 30,000 people collaborating in the cloud and models and project data for there as well. And, all that data represents billions of dollars in construction as well within there. So, I'm really lucky with that role. We get to work with great people, great clients across the globe. And, we're seeing where they're going within digitization as well now.
So, Dave, the main reason I guess I had you on today is obviously you've worked with AECOM and you've spent a bit of time working within the groups that have been developing and rolling out the UK BIM standards. Now, I guess I'm a bit of a Simon Sinek fan, and I know it's kind of not your response in terms of the overall government, but from your perspective and your kind of role that you play in AECOM, you'd have a pretty good understanding as to the reason why the UK government decided to try and mandate, or didn't try, but have mandated BIM deliverables for projects from the 4th of April in 2016. So what do you think the reason is why?
It's a really good question, Nathan. And you're right. I was lucky enough to be seconded way back at the beginning of that programme into the UK BIM Task Group within there. That was that connection, working in partnership with government. And as you rightly say, it was very much purpose-driven within there. And actually, when you think about it, it's actually had a hypothesis. This thing called building information Modelling, I still think of it as building information management. And actually, when we always used to refer to it in the task group, it was always information modelling and information management within there as well. But actually, the hypothesis was very much that, government as a client can derive significant improvements in cost, value, and carbon performance through open, shareable asset information. So if you went back there, it was actually testing, if you like, the why statement within there. So there was no focus really in what, but actually, why? Can we get better value within there as well for this use of this thing called, digital information? One of the things that we also had, and I don't know if you remember it within there, we also had a series of tests around about that hypothesis as well. The ones where is it valuable there? Is it going to help us, maximize client value by increasing benefits, little or no extra cost for the client? Is it understandable?
Yes.
Is it general in terms of both buildings and infrastructure, non-proprietary? So there was also a series of tests to help us actually test the hypothesis within there as well. So it was them going and actually testing it there, as you say, in terms of actually the purpose statement as well. I think the other thing that was quite unique about the UK, everybody talks about the UK BIM strategy. I don't think we had. I always think it was a case of actually we had a government construction strategy, and one of the key themes of it was this thing called building information modelling. And actually, there was another thing within there that got mandated, and it's now part of, what is our UK BIM in terms of soft landings. We've got a standard for it, BS 8536. Which looks at briefing, but actually ensuring we have alignment with those who operate around users, with those that are making our, doing the briefing and the investment, and use BIM to test our targets within there as well. There was also a theme that looked at much more collaborative forms of procurement, that looked at early contractor engagement and project bank accounts. So there was several things going on, if you like, to test that purpose within there. As well, but how can we do it better, and how can we actually drive value out of there? And I think one of the things within what was the level 2 BIM program, it really showed that there was real value, and I think the real value was often in terms of alignment of FM and operational teams with those who were designing and constructing within there as well. So really, I think sometimes the big change and the biggest benefit was the behavioural change that we made.
Yeah, well, I one of the things that I look at, and I've even had conversations with facility managers for major asset owners a number of years ago, was the fact that during the procurement timeframes, the facilities management guys were never consulted and never kind of asked as to what their requirements were. And one of the biggest catchphrases I think that are really important that I've seen, with regards to BIM implementation from the UK is beginning with the end in mind. And I think that that's probably a key factor beyond all of this.
Yeah, I would say, and when we think about that, the big part of this golden thread, golden thread of information, but also, golden thread of purpose, making sure that our clients actually have, if you like, clear strategy for both capital expenditure, but importantly, operational strategy as well. And that clear purpose goes right the way through the project, and using our information, our models to actually test that purpose. And if you like, the measurable targets as well within there. And I think, if anything, as you say, that's been one of the key things, is actually that better collaboration and it's starting the conversation between, those that operate, and not just the FM teams, but also, the strategic asset management teams. And most importantly, we use assets, it might be in terms of, somebody in clinical staff, it could be a teacher, it could be a pupil. We need to make sure that, we're involving these end users in the development of design, the testing of the models as well. And we've got all these wonderful tools now in terms of immersive reality where they can really get involved and understand what's being designed.
I guess we've touched on kind of some of the documents and the outcomes regarding the BIM mandate, but I guess, and you kind of touched on how the key areas were covered and how BIM was only part of it. And I guess when you're talking about that, you're talking about the Her Majesty Government's industrial strategy. So the government and industry in partnership construction 2025 report. I think that's possibly where you're coming from. And one of the things that I think that's really important for asset owners to kind of understand or learn from the UK and their kind of level 2 mandate is actually in regards to some of the significant targets that were nominated within that report. Do you just want to briefly touch on those targets? I know there was ones regarding lower costs and delivery and emissions and exporting of services. Do you want to touch on that so that the listeners understand, I guess, the other side of it as to why the UK government did what they did?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, that when we had the initial strategy, I always, looked at a series, if you like, of staging posts, and a continuation of the programme. And, as you said, there was 4 key targets within there. A lower cost target of 33%. How do you reduce, the cost of construction, but not thinking about capital expenditure across the whole life cost of a built asset. So starting to think about construction in terms of the cost side, but thinking more and more right the way through for the earliest beginnings where you can influence it in terms of strategic assessment, the briefing, the design, the construction. And there was a realization that, again, if you've got data feeding forward and backwards, that you can start to influence right at the very beginning with a much better briefing process. And actually, as we all know, that probably 80% of total expenditure costs are in operation as well. How can the digitization of that help government clients be able to reduce their overall whole life costs?
Yep.
There was also one that I think was really interesting, faster delivery of 50%. And folk went, oh, what, on site? Well, and this is my own personal view, is much more than just that. As a series of different components. How do you digitize, maybe automate some of the front end pieces, and maybe in terms of gaining planning permission or statutory compliance, can we start to digitize that? Can we start to automate some of the procurement process, reduce time within there? And then when we do get onto site through design for manufacture and assembly and much more industrialization of the process, can we maximize off-site opportunities? So when you start to add all these different pieces up, from the DFMA to automation of processes, then I think it is fair to say that 50% faster delivery, not just in site, but right from the early stages, can really happen. And if you look at a complete construction program, and not just design construct, but looking at the early stages in terms of business cases, procurement within their statutory approvals, there's a huge amount that can be shaved off that real front end within there through digitization within there as well. There was a third target that looked at lower emissions, which were especially looking at in terms of reduction in greenhouse gases as well within the built environment. And I think it's fair to say, initially when when level 2 came out, it was looking at probably embedded carbon more than anything.
Yep.
And I think what we're seeing now, as industry becomes more advanced, especially through sensor technologies and everything, we can start to look at, if you like, operational performance of our assets much more. But what I would say is, I think, as an industry, we've been particularly, poor at measuring, operational performance within there. And through sensor technologies, all that sensing and real-time analytics, we've got a real opportunity to better understand and optimize, if you like, our greenhouse gases in the operation within there. And again, through early testing and design. And the fourth one, if you like, was an interesting one. How do you improve in exports as well within there? And, we start to, be able to export skills, services within there, or indeed smart construction products and materials as well. So if you get this right, you start to build, real opportunities. And you think, within the UK, what's roughly, construction is 7% of our GDP. It contributes a huge amount, and it can either put a brake on or increase our overall economic performance within there. So I think, if anything, there's a big realization that better productivity can, boost, our national economy and start to give, export opportunities, for the likes of AECOM or whoever, to start to be able to do that. I think, we've seen that already in the UK in terms of, if you like, the internationalization of some of the standards that were initially born out of the UK principles as well.
Now, one of the things I take away from all of that, and when I first saw these targets, I actually feel they're highly ambitious. And at this point in time, we're only a couple of years into the goals stated or stipulated at being 2025. And as we're aware, the construction industry is still adapting to change, and depending upon who you talk to, it's the level 2 BIM adoption is either going reasonably well, and there's some people that struggle at their end as well. Now, from the perspective of the UK government and the projects that you're aware of over there, Dave, are you starting to see the results that they wanted to achieve from that mandate?
Yeah, I think from an AECOM perspective, we're starting to see, our clients, really starting to get value out of it. Is again, I think, better, smarter procurement, but also there's, I think when we think about value, we get too, if you like, held up, if you like, on the quantitative value, looking at the cost. But I think for a lot of clients, there's been the qualitative value within there as well, in terms of actually, it might be in terms of reinvigorating, the image construction within there, increasing capability of workforce within there. It's more talented, and diverse within there as well. But I think really for the clients, the huge value we're seeing is actually getting a complete and accurate data set right at the point of handover that they can use to safely maintain within there as well. And again, I think they're starting to, through market conditions, see the value proposition from cost and time coming through as well. So yeah, I mean, I think industry's got a long tail within there, but I think it's really starting to make it effect. And I think we're starting to see a lot of people, especially our clients, building upon that now, starting to think about digital not just as a project thing, but think more about digital efficiencies in terms of their whole assets within there as well. So clients that, where BIM and digital was a project-led thing are now thinking about, that works. How do we now start to think about a digital asset management strategy within there as well? So, yeah, I think, the real value is coming there, and it's now building on it and actually thinking about an industry in the UK that's very much thinking about efficiency and is much more technologically advanced within there as well. And I think maybe the language, I think BIM is one component of it now, but, they're starting to see much more, as we mentioned, thinking about sensor-based technologies, industrialization, and robotics. Up in Scotland, where I'm based, we've got a Construction Scotland Innovation Centre that's got, all the construction robotics to go and test, maybe new ideas of constructs within there as well, often not involving, human intervention. So I think, yeah, the answer is yes. We're starting to see a lot of our clients getting the benefits of what we used to refer to as BIM Level 2. I think the language is changing a bit now with industrial, with the international standards within there. With that confidence, they're still now building out upon it as well within there. And I think at the end of the day, there's, a huge momentum, with issues such as the green economy, the smart infrastructure market as well within there.
I could probably vouch for the improvement in export component because of the number of events that we've caught up with each other here in Australia and even over in Europe. So, it's an opportunity for you guys to do that.
Yeah, but I think that's great that, we've now started that, I think BIM's been a catalyst for that, in terms of starting an international conversation about how we better our industry. So I think if anything, I always take it away is, BIM has truly built, a collaborative global community, where folk across all the world are talking about, through either be it BIM, be it digital engineering, often over a small beverage, it might be a soft drink or whatever, but, it's brought people together. And I think if anything, that's a big part, people are genuinely interested in terms of, how we advance our industry, especially now for the next generation. But, people are excited about it. And I think that's been a great thing, isn't it? Again, people excited about the industry they're in again and, committing to make change.
And seeing how they can make the world a better place. Some of the things that I find really intriguing here that occurred in Australia for a number of years. Now, obviously, you probably be aware with your involvement with AECOM, the number of government agencies here in Australia that have just started releasing principles and policies and stuff, which is really, really positive for industry because it gives a lot of confidence. And I spoke earlier to Andrew Kurthloy, so I know you spent time with as well in the podcast series about the Queensland movement and the policy up here. But there was a period of time whereby government had a position where they suggested industry should lead this, and obviously the amount of work that leaders within industry have been doing over the years has kind of, I guess, gotten to a tipping point where government thinks it's actually worthwhile moving forward. Now, do you believe that the UK government went about it the right way in terms of mandating all of their projects over $50 million, be delivered to this high level of requirements back in April 2016?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and if you like, the £50 million, as you're right to say, was a starting point way back, but then that threshold, was lifted. But if you went back to 2011, if you can cast your mind that back, you might still have been in shorts or at that point, within there, back at school.
I'm not that young.
But yeah, but remember the backdrop, especially within the UK. We're in a period of terrible recession within there, and the people were looking actually how do we improve things within there, and I think in terms of government is probably the biggest construction client out there. Probably had a amazing opportunity within there to actually make this happen with industry, that we're willing to change, because of recession within there as well. We're looking for a bit of a beacon and a lighthouse to, for the main client to actually set a trajectory for there as well. And I think there's also, a sense of scale as well, in terms of, the size of our, the construction portfolio in the UK versus that of Australia as well. But again, go back to, the so-called mandate, if you like, as well. You can see the tests that we had within there, and I think if anything, the UK, we're really good at building the communities within there. We've now got the UK BIM Alliance and such like there, so it's very much about a partnership, approach within there as well. So do I think they got it right? Yes, and I think what we're seeing is that continuation within the UK in terms of the government now looking at the next steps within there in terms of better outcomes within there and trying to improve productivity. So there's an ongoing commitment to there. And I think what happened was, I think industry would have got there, but I think, for a client intervention, it sped the process up and it gave us an opportunity to learn lessons as well, so by having a structured way of doing it, lessons could be shared, pilot projects monitored, and also building the standards around about it as well were hugely important. So I think they've done it right. Is it right for Australia? I think that's a different question within there. And equally, we're seeing amazing stuff come out of Australia as well, and great clients such as Transport for New South Wales, Victoria State Government, all doing amazing stuff, within there as well. So, when it comes to BIM, I think we can all learn lessons from all parts of the, the globe. And I think, one of the things we should never do, I think, is, be introspective. We've got to look right around the globe and what are the good parts, that we're all doing within there as well. And I think now, the big parts about that innovation agenda, the research and development within there as well. So, yeah, I mean, we were lucky at the point in time in the UK, we had a government that went and led it within there.
Yeah, and change of government can also cause sorts of changes that happen here in Australia, which happened over 10 years ago as well. But as people can obviously tell, and as you've covered before, you're a Scotsman. Now, people probably don't know that I also have some Scottish blood in me with my my mother's parents coming from Glasgow, and I'm hoping to be up in Edinburgh later this year with you to experience Built. But back to the BIM world, you've also been involved with the Scottish BIM implementation as well, and I believe that the Scottish journey began after the UK one. From your perspective, has the Scottish methodology, is it built off the back of the UK ideology and then made some adjustments to suit the Scottish way of life, or has it taken things a different approach?
Well, as you rightly said, Nathan, up in Scotland, I would say it's very much, I'd say the UK is aligned generally. And one of the things that the UK has here is a Home Nations, working group, to try and make sure there is consistency of approach within there. But, if you went back, one of the things that Scotland has got, which I think is really strong policy around about BIM, I was lucky enough to chair the BIM delivery group in Scotland that's led by the Scottish Future Trust. And I would say to any viewers, listeners of the podcast, to go into just type SFT BIM portal, and there's a huge wealth, if you like, of information within there. But, one of the things that was a real catalyst in Scotland was a procurement review within there. And one of the things that came out of there was a recommendation for BIM where appropriate within Scotland within there. And ultimately that came up with, Scottish Government came up with a policy note that bodies within their Scottish Public Finance Manual, within the likes of our National Health Service, our Prison Service, or Transportation, within there. Now, the thing that we came up with, I think that was quite unique, was a grading tool. Because remember that word appropriate, there'd been a bit of a survey done to look at capability and capacity of the supply chain. And there was a realisation that, remember, we're trying to fast track a programme in Scotland within about 18 months within there that, not everybody could jump up to level 2. So one of the things we done was create a grading tool. So if your project was over, 2 million capex of real money, i.e. Scottish money, UK money, within there, that public body, had to go in the grading tool. There was no BIM option, but either give you what we call BIM Level 1 in Scotland, which is about information management, common data environment, naming conventions within there. Might still be in that, CAD is your, you're still as your primary graphical data within there, or BIM Level 2. But it meant there was a grading one to come up with an appropriate means, if you like, of grading your project. Then what happened as part of, the policy was to say, right, okay, you've not done that. You then do a return on investment to look at, as a client, what does that return on investment, i.e., you might have to invest money into a common data environment or information manager roles. And then what it does, it takes you through a very clear navigator of, for each of the departments about as a client body that's going to help you find, your BIM processes and help you deliver your project as well within there. So still very much aligned with, UK standards within there, but, starting to build the tool set to help the clients round about it. There was also a lot of BIM case studies done in Scotland that informed that ROI tool as well within there. So still aligned, but at the same time, having that appropriateness test and the ROI test with there, and a very rapid program as well. And of course, that program continues, as well up in Scotland. I think for the size of our nation in Scotland, we've come a long way in a short time in terms of BIM, and encouraged to do it in an appropriate way, as well within there. So, yeah, again, we're seeing the value proposition of BIM, as well within there, within our, a relatively small size of a nation.
And I guess the key thing to take away from that is that the other key factor that you touched on is actually understanding the capability of the supply chain. Now, as an asset owner, you may have desires to have specific asset information, but if your supply chain actually aren't capable to do it yet, or only a few people are capable of doing it, it potentially could come at too high a cost at that point in time, whereas in a couple of years' time, it might be actually more efficient or affordable.
Indeed, and I think one of the big things, if you can actually get a client who's never done BIM before to actually be doing what we call BIM Level 1 in Scotland, becoming good at information management, becoming good at naming and classification, then actually the jump from Level 1 to Level 2 is quite small, within there as well. And actually, I still think there's a real value of just getting the information management component, the foundation right, and doing it safely and securely. But again, still built on the same standards within there. And again, I think if any standard gives the value, it's probably a complementary one on soft landings or BS 8536, brackets better briefing within there. But for me, this mutualism between building information modeling and soft landings is just so important if you want to get better outcomes. And I think back to purpose, you mentioned right at the beginning of this, our purpose shouldn't be build, nicer, fancier models. It should actually get better outcomes from our assets and those that use those assets.
Yes, the model's only built for the purpose of what information is required rather than just for the sake of building
Indeed.
a model.
And suddenly if you bring the people together around about the model, then, you're going to win a watch.
It brings a campfire, a virtual campfire for people to tell stories.
Yeah.
The drive that you have had from government, both in the UK and in Scotland, they've been government project led. Now, for interest for people down here in Australia and asset managers down here in Australia, also that's just seen our government start to put policy forward. Has the jump of, I guess, industry and the government over in the UK and Scotland meant that it's actually brought forward industry or made the industry more capable for private asset owners to actually obtain the same benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, we've seen I think it's fair to say now, we've seen the public sector leading this, but equally, the private sector, are starting to, take it and build upon it very rapidly as well within there. And there's a group in the UK called BIM for Clients that, have helped that alignment happen within there. But, hugely positive, and I think equally say that the private sector clients are taking that. Now, it depends, what your role is as a client. You might want to, just be, creating something to flip it, pretty quickly. But again, if you've got an accurate data set, then it's going to help you be able to sell it to, other potential clients. And then if you hold on to that asset or your portfolio owner, the value of having not just project data, but be able to compare project against project and benchmark them, hugely valuable within there as well. But I think we're seeing an equal pool now from both public and private sector, and you're looking at these digital efficiencies.
That's good to see, and that hopefully will bring confidence to the private sector, not only from where you are in the UK, but here in Australia, to understand that as industry is going to improve, they can also seek the same benefits that the governments are seeking, and therefore being able to deliver more for less, or to deliver a higher quality outcome for the same investment. Obviously, I've been lucky enough to catch up with you and numerous times all over the place, and now obviously we have the ISO suite in place, which is essentially been drawn upon from the British standards. How much interest in your role through AECOM have you found that other countries or other people from other countries have actually wanted to kind of not steal, but essentially draw upon the experiences of the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say, the ISO standards create a series of information management principles that can be used anywhere within the globe, and I think there's real interest, no matter where we go. And I think the standards are actually just a good thing, having that harmonization across the globe. And I think obviously they're going to continue as well within that digital suite. I think the next release will be around about 2020 with part 3 and part 5, which is looking at digitization of the operational cycle and mindful security as well within there. So I think everybody across the globe is interested. And of course, if there's any experience that can be shared in terms of delivering it, that's fantastic as well. But at the same time, I know if we look at AECOM in terms of our asset characterization as well, sort of thing, we build upon that one as well. Each country is been lucky enough to be doing different parts for different clients. You can then bring that into build upon I always think of the things like information management or standards as being our foundation layer, and then you can build upon that. You can start to, when you come good at managing information and data exchanges, then you can start to plug into other things as well. So we've seen amazing things happen in the US. So you think, right, we can plug that one in, or come across the Asia Pacific. It might be in terms of VDC. We can plug these things in as well within there. So yeah, important to us is getting that foundation layer light, the information management landscape, the data exchanges, doing it securely, and then you get innovation coming through, from all different countries, especially in terms of Australia, New Zealand, that you can plug into that and share across our global footprint.
Data that's more easily accessible makes it more easy, or makes it more cost effective in the management, rather than someone spending an hour trying to find a piece of information. Because it's structured, they know how to find it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think that is the main thing when you talk about that golden thread of information. Having, we've seen too many tragedies round about the world, and people can't find information to, within there. If we can have information that's indexable and searchable, at the push of a button, that morally, that's what we need within there. So it brings in a couple of things, doesn't it? Good information management practices, good classification. I think that's hugely important as well within there. Being able to do it securely, and the role of the common data environment.
So Dave, thanks very much, mate, today for sitting down and talking with me to discuss the digital journey that's occurred over in the UK and Scotland. Now I'm going to ask you. Sorry?
I say no problem, Nathan. It's a real pleasure. I think hugely exciting times, especially in terms of ANZ as well.
Oh, I greatly appreciate that. And I really look forward to catching up with you later this year. But one question I have for you that I'm going to ask all of my guests on the show, what does BIM mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it means better collaboration and better outcomes through structured data and information.
Oh, that's lovely. I was waiting when you said better. I was almost going to wait for you to say better information management. That's my catchphrase.
Yeah, but back to your one purpose. Back to purpose. It's all about having clear purpose and using our information and data to unlock it.
It's only going to be beneficial to do any of this if there's actually a good reason for it at the outcome.
Yeah, it's hugely important as well. When we talk about purpose and outcomes, that our clients, those that receive data, actually make use out of it as well, and don't just leave it on a hard drive or on a shared drive.
It then becomes almost like lean construction in some ways, that the right data is provided for the right people at the right time.
Indeed, and actually use it.
So Dave, mate, we got carried away as usual, and as we always will. But thanks, mate, for your time. For more information on the UK and Scotland's digital transition, please head over to our website and find the links to the various web pages and documents that we discussed today for further reading. I look forward to sharing our next podcast in a fortnight's time. Until then, good luck with your digital transition. If you would like assistance with your digital transition, please contact us at digital@fultontrotter.com.au. For more information, or if you'd like to continue the discussion in the comments section, head over to our website, thedigitaltransition.com. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on our future podcasts. We would also appreciate it if you provide us with a rating and take the time to provide us with a review. Thanks for listening to The Digital Transition, brought to you by Fulton Trotter Digital. The Digital Transition.